a talk show that's real. This is the Brian Kilmeade Show.
Right now, what is on the table is a court case that Republicans have advocated for overturn the Affordable Care Act. That is the case that is on the table in the Supreme Court. So that is where our concern is.
Should that be a concern? Let's talk about it with Bryan Rotella. Brian has looked at healthcare. He knows as much about anyone in the country. He's an attorney, founder and CEO of senior partner of Genco Legal. Brian, you heard this debate yesterday. Thanks so much for joining us from Florida. You heard this debate yesterday or 2 days ago, and you hear that if you seat Barrett, goodbye Obamacare. Is that the case?
No. And hello, Brian. Brian, I love your historian and the history books that you do. You'll remember this. Remember the 1964 election with Barry Goldwater and Lyndon Johnson, the little girl playing with the daisies?
Yep.
And then there's the big mushroom cloud that comes up because they were saying that Goldwater was going to drop nuclear bombs on Vietnam. And they said we were all going to go into the darkness. What's going on right now at the Democratic Party with Speaker Pelosi and what I saw the other night with former Vice President Biden is the same level of scare tactic about what exactly is this lawsuit, what the Trump administration's position actually is on this lawsuit about Obamacare, the timing of it, and ultimately what the policy fallout will be.
But we don't know how she's going to rule, and we know Obamacare is a bad plan. We know without the mandate, it no longer has financing because people aren't forced to buy it. So what's left of it what do you think will be left when they're done?
Well, that's getting back to the beginning of it, Brian. What's actually going on, so everyone in the audience understands, November 10th, there's an oral argument in front of the Supreme Court. And the Democrats are saying, well, if you've got Judge Barrett, now you've got your ability to rip up Obamacare because the lawsuit that was brought by a bunch of states and then two plaintiffs who said they had to pay the individual mandate, they're saying tear up all of Obamacare. The Trump administration's position actually is, we think it's unconstitutional now, that individual mandate, because remember the tax law that set it at zero. But while we think the law then should be unconstitutional, we only think it should allow for a remedy for the folks that were injured and how they were injured. That means these two plaintiffs in Texas, whether they had to pay the penalty or not. Brian, that's the Trump administration's position and the DOJ's position in the lawsuit that's going to be heard on November 10th. They're not even arguing about the pre-existing conditions, which is why this is completely fake news. What I really think was going to happen, and I think Judge Barrett's going to do this, and more importantly, Judge Kavanaugh, they're believers in severability, which is a fancy legal term for let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. And what they look at is congressional intent. When that tax bill came up, yes, they set the individual mandate to zero, but there was nothing there about repealing all of Obamacare. So I am almost 100% confident, and every other lawyer like me, that when this gets heard on November 10th, and by the way, we will not see a decision, in my opinion, till June of 2021, the decision is going to be, it's now unconstitutional because there's no longer a tax, and that's how it became constitutional. But let's not throw out all the other stuff that people like pre-existing condition protections, like kids being on their parents' insurance to age 26. Let's let that be dealt with by the legislature. That's what's going to happen. This is a complete nuclear bomb, the Daisy commercial tactic that the Democrats are doing.
But the one thing Republicans haven't helped themselves. Where's their plan?
Well, that's right. But here's the other, where all of the white noise that, and especially the other night in the debate, what people are missing. This president and this administration has done, in my opinion, two of the most significant things for healthcare already. And he didn't bring it up the other night. One, his Opioid Relief Act. What was the major crisis when we came into this administration that was set by the prior administration? We had hundreds of thousands of people dying of opiate abuse. Now in this country, under that act, doctors have to be extremely careful in how they prescribe opiate medication. Ask anyone out in the audience who's had a surgery or something. You can only get controlled substances for 3 days for acute pain, 7 days for chronic pain without a refill. The other thing that happened during COVID, which was an incredibly quick pivot by this administration, is we took down all of these old arcane laws about telehealth. So now you could see your doctor via FaceTime. What's that do? Doctors don't have to put all this overhead into their practices. It's going to drive costs down. These are free market solutions that are already in place by the Trump administration, but they're getting lost in all of this noise about pre-existing conditions. And one last statistic on that, Brian. Pre-existing conditions, as far as people who actually buy insurance on the market, not Medicare, not Medicaid, and not through their employer in this country, you know what the percentage is? 6% of the American population. That's the percentage of people who buy it on the market and don't get it through those other places where there are protections for pre-existings, regardless of the ACA.
And Brian, the other thing I heard is this administration has helped bring the cost down with Obamacare.
That's the funny thing. Everyone said when you take this individual mandate out, which was supposed to drive all these people into the market, that, oh my God, the cost would explode. There's actually statistics out there that we've increased, we've gone up in the or we've gone down in the uninsured in this country, and that we've actually lowered costs with the individual mandate being out. Why? For some of these other things that I've been talking about. And again, the Trump administration, and it's not been articulated, in my opinion, well, and it should be, has done so much with especially Seema Verna, the head of Centers of Medicare and Medicaid, to drive costs down, including this favored nation item that the president brought up the other night, where now all of a sudden folks out there on Medicare, their drug prices are going to be tied to the lowest price in Canada or over in Europe, not to some price that's just arbitrarily set here in the United States, much higher than it would be in those other countries.
It's very interesting. Brian, thanks so much for the clarification. Appreciate it.
My pleasure, Brian.
Bryan Rotella, great insight.